Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Today I got a very special guest, Mr. Chris Wright. He is running for Waxahachie City Council, Place 3. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great. It's a wonderful day outside.
Yes, it is. And I'm very thankful that you're on the show in here with me um, and ready to talk to the people of Waxahachie and Ellis County. Um, I wanted to go ahead and have you introduce yourself to the people. Obviously, there's a lot of new people. I don't know how long you've been around Waxahachie, but uh, kind of tell the voters about yourself.
Will do. Well, first of all, my name's Byron Christopher Wright. I go by Chris and always have, so everybody who lives here knows I'm Chris. The only people know me by Byron are the ones I give my credit card to. I grew up in Waxahachie. I was born in Fort Hood at the Army base. We moved to Waxahachie when I was a baby. Lived here all the way through college. Once I graduated from the University of Texas, then I traveled for Kmart Corporation. I had a 13-state region that I traveled around in the country, and I was in charge of remodeling the softline parts of the Kmart stores. I had crews in these 13 states. And during that time, I was responsible for the budgeting of all the dollars that they had and coming in on budget. So you can imagine buying airline tickets, hotels, food, and keeping these guys traveling from state to state, but still living within the budget. It was a task, but we were able to do it, and it's something I've done. I went to school here in Waxahachie, grew up, and when I came back after leaving Kmart Corporation to run our personal family rare out-of-print book business, I got more involved in the community at the time. I ran the Texas Booksellers Association for several years. I'm still a member of that association. And with that, I put on trade shows that helped with book collecting and inspired book collecting. All these trade shows that I dealt with dealers and collectors, but I also dealt with universities, the University of Texas, dealt with Baylor University, the University of Texas in Arlington, the DeGoyer Library at SMU. So I've dealt with all these different institutions when I was in that role, bringing awareness to their presses and the things that they had as well. I then took over the basketball booster club when one of the guys I played with came back to town, and I've been running that ever since. I've been in Boy Scouts since my 19-year-old son was old enough to join the Boy Scouts. And I will want to say one of the proudest things I have as a community servant is by the end of April of this year, if everything goes as to plan, there will be 12 people that went through the Boy Scouts when I was a Scoutmaster that they at some point were with me as Scouts that have gotten their Eagle Scout. And I'm really proud of that. I was able to go to Canada with these kids and go canoeing. I was able to go to New Mexico. So that's a little bit of what we've done.
You've done a lot. I mean, that's a lot of responsibility. Sounds like you've been around a lot of business and corporations and all kinds of stuff. You have you've been through, and now that Eagle Scout thing, that is quite an accomplishment. I was never part of the Scouts in any way, but I did know some people growing up, and I knew that Eagle Scout was a very difficult accomplishment to get to. So that's pretty cool that you were involved with that. It helps those kids. So with all that, why did you decide you wanted to run for city council?
Well, once I got back and involved, I have been going for about the last 4 years to nearly every single planning and zoning meeting and every city council meeting. I mean, I miss one occasionally because something comes up, but I go to most of those meetings. And I just want to know what was going on in the community because it was obvious it was growing and it was going to start growing more and more and more. I grew up with Kevin Strength, and he came and talked to me and he said, Chris, you need to get active and you need to get involved because when we were kids, we knew what we wanted Waxahachie to be like. And so I jumped on the bandwagon and started going to all the meetings and trying to pay attention. And I do speak at the city council meetings, and I speak at planning and zoning when it's the public comment part at the beginning of the show. And so the timing was coming around. And then this last year, COVID was there. During COVID, my father had lung cancer. I had been talking to people about running, but during that time, it wasn't a good time because I was going over and helping my mom with my dad. COVID was there, couldn't go out in public and then go back around my dad with lung cancer. So that was a hard time. But my dad passed away a year ago in September. And when he passed away, I talked more with my wife. Now she's a 35-year teacher here in the school systems in Waxahachie. So I had to get her permission. I had to get her permission to get into politics. She knew I always wanted to, but I spoke with her and she was okay with it. And then it just fell into place that at the time, my opponent had announced that she wasn't going to run for office, that she was stepping down and was going to spend more time with her family and not run for office. So I jumped on it and filed and ordered signs and did everything else. And about 9.5 weeks later, I ended up having an opponent because she changed her mind. But that's good. Having an opponent's not a problem. It gives the voters two people to choose from.
It does give the voters choice.
But that's the reason I chose to run. And there were some things going on that I would have preferred were done differently. And so I thought, hey, it's my time to run and to get my thoughts and my opinions out and how I could represent the people of Waxahachie and everybody, not just the people that grew up here and that have lived here forever.
Yeah.
I get to deal with them with the basketball team because a lot of people are coming in from out of town that are involved in the schools and in the basketball program. And since I'm at the school a lot, because of that, I've gotten to meet a whole lot of people that didn't grow up here, but I've gotten their opinions.
Right. And you know what? There's a lot of those, according to the census. There's a lot of, and then my interview recently with the mayor, Mayor Barnes was talking about 1,200 housing starts that went in, and we're going to get into the housing boom and stuff like that. But there are a lot of new people, and there's so many with people. You're going to have 100 people. You're going to have 100 different opinions on how to do things. So one of the things that I do is I ask every candidate kind of fundamental questions, because what comes out of those, everything that comes out of you or how you behave or what you do on the city council will come from your principles. So, exactly. So I ask you those fundamental questions. So what is the role of the city council in the lives of the citizens of Waxahachie? What is the proper role?
The role of the council is to just be there to manage the taxpayers' money that's coming in and to spend it wisely and hopefully in a manner that takes care of what the taxpayer wants as well as what the city needs. Those don't always match up. And a matter of fact, a lot of times they don't match up. But you got to do what you can as a city council person to take both of the weight of what the city needs and what the city leaders are asking for and what the taxpayers having to pay and how big a strain that is putting on them. Now, that's only one of the items that you have to take care of as city council person. You also got to take care of the other things that just are the quality of life things. You got to provide for everyone. You can't just pick and choose where you provide. I don't know how many times I hear the people, we don't want to be Frisco. We don't want to be Frisco. When do we get another grocery store? And that's where you come into the decisiveness or divisiveness on what you can and can't have. You know, the grocery store chains will all tell you, you got to have a population of this and you have to have this many people. And the people in town will say, we don't want any more people. We've got too many people as it is. Well, you can't have both of those. And the city doesn't choose, as everyone's told you, I know 100 times, the city doesn't choose where a grocery store comes and when it does. But the city council does, and they have in the past. They give tax abatements and incentives to get companies to come and to do things. Showbiz movie theaters, perfect.
They did. They had an abatement. Yeah.
They gave abatements to them to come in and put that bowling alley in. And there were some people that weren't happy because we had an existing bowling alley. And we're not giving anything to those guys. And they've been here forever. That bowling alley's been there since I was a little kid. It's had different owners.
Yeah.
But it's been a local project. So the city council is there to answer to the people, but they vote for you to oversee that. And that's why every 2 years we reelect each position. So that if you're not doing what they like and you're not keeping the people happy, then you're gone. We get somebody in there that's going to represent what we want.
Right. Well, one of the things that's part of being part of the city council is, you know, you swear allegiance also to the Constitution of the United States. And that's another fundamental question. What does the First Amendment mean to you?
Well, the First Amendment, there are limits to what you can and can't do. And I watched one of your previous interviews that you had, and it went into the yelling in a theater and that yelling fire in a theater and those kind of things. I mean, I think those are basic principles we all grew up hearing. But to throw it into what's happened in the city recently, the council decided to put a 5-minute limit on the public comments at the beginning of city council meetings and limit how much time you had to speak. And I stood up and spoke, and I said, well, these meetings don't last that long to start with. They last an hour and a half. I've been coming for 5 years, and the longest I've ever heard anybody talk is 5 or 6 minutes in the public comments. I didn't understand why we were trying to limit the free speech of the people, because when you look through the agenda for the meetings, there's only a couple of items in there that are public hearings where the people are allowed to speak. When there is a public hearing, we don't have a limit on how long the public can speak. So if you're going to have items on the agenda that don't say public hearing, that don't give the citizenry the right to speak, and you're telling them, well, you can make your comments during the public comments, then why are we restricting their free speech during the public comments when you don't restrict it during the meeting on an item that says public hearing? And I'll give you a perfect example of that. There are certain things that show up on the agenda that say consider a supplemental expenditure for this or a supplemental expenditure for that. There's people that come that want to make a comment about that, and they're told they have to make those comments during the public comments, but then we limit them.
Right.
So that gives you an example of where I fall on the city when it comes to the First Amendment. And I will, anytime we get away from that too much, I'm going to answer the questions as it pertains to the city, because I'm running for the city council. I'm not running for the country. So.
And thank you. And that is exactly what I want from you. I want you to be able to tell the people of Waxahachie what that means in their life. What your fundamentals on the First Amendment means in their life. So in their life, that would mean, from what you've spoken, that 5-minute rule wouldn't apply if you had the only say in it. That wouldn't apply. So I don't know why they came up with that, and that's something that definitely should be discussed. So one of the things that happened during this time, and you mentioned it, COVID came and went, and Omicron, and then now poof, it's gone. I'm sure there'll be another variant. They're saying that it's endemic stage now, and that it's just going to come back around. That said, there were decisions that had to be made. I had Judge Little on, and that's the county, but Judge Little comes on and says, hey, they told me there could be 200,000 people dead, and those are the kind of things they were telling me, and I had to respond to those things. So you're a member of a council. They come up to you, they say this, COVID's coming back and everything's going to flip out. Are you going to support closing up things? Are you going to support closing up church services? Things that were done during the pandemic, we can second guess now, but they were done. So what would you do?
Well, you're right. There were things that are second guessed, because, when something like that's a once in a generational thing, when those things happen and it's never happened before, you're right. You put those people right there on the spot. And I don't think any of them, Todd Little, David Hill, I don't think any of the people did anything other than try to look out for the safety of the public. That's what they thought they were doing. And it wasn't just state level, and it wasn't just city level. I mean, it was happening all over the country where they were doing it. Some places were a whole lot more strict than others. As you know, right now, I heard it on the radio today. They won't let this one basketball player that plays in the NBA play in his home arena, because New York has this rule against anybody who has COVID, or anybody that wants to play in the arena has to be vaccinated, and he refuses to get vaccinated. that's his choice. I don't think it's anybody's place to make him get vaccinated to play basketball. You got an arena full of people in there, and you're going to tell that one guy he can't play basketball because he's not vaccinated. Now, then, that being said, I got vaccinated. I didn't have a problem getting vaccinated. Some do. However, where you're coming on about closing down businesses and doing the things that, I am a believer that you've got to look at both sides. You've got to look at what whoever's going to say the science is, and you got to see if you think it's really that correct. You got both sides on it. And with this last thing with COVID, there was no way to know at the time. We know now that with time, it spread more at the time if you weren't really careful. But over time, we kept adding layers of things that we were doing, which helped to keep it down. Do I think they should have closed churches down? I think if they were closing everything down, then yes, they should have closed the churches at the same. Everyone should have been treated equally. But there's a preacher from Waxahachie. His last name's Edwards, and he lives up in Kansas City, but he's from Waxahachie, and he still streams today. He streams a church service all the time. At the beginning, nobody knew how to stream anything, so they were just missing church altogether. But I think they made the right moves once they realized, then they started opening the churches back up. Did it take too long? Yeah, it took too long in certain circumstances, and didn't take long enough in other areas where it was spreading like wildfire and nobody knew what to do. Nobody knew how to treat it. Nobody knew how to act about it. But that's one of those civil liberties that they're trying to do the best they can. And I think Judge Little and David Hill and those guys at the time thought they were doing what was best for everyone. And I think in the long run, we've realized that all that did was make it worse.
Right. And I agree. When I was talking with Judge Little about it, and just the daunting thing of you're being told you're a small county judge and you're being told 200,000 or more of your citizens are gonna die. I mean, at that time, and that's the information that he had, and he went with it. But it's good to see what the mindset is in a candidate that wants to run for office locally, and what their where their principles lie. And that's kind of why I asked you, because you might be dealing with that again. That might not be a one-time thing, once in a generation thing. I hope it is, but it might not be. So that's definitely why I asked you the question. But I wanted to go ahead and move on. One of the things that are happening in this town, and you kind of touched on it, is growth. So we want this. We want HEB to go on the other side of town. We need this. We need that. Oh, it's growing too much. We need to stop the growth. You have very different opinions from very different people, and they want to keep the small town feel. And I can understand that. It's why I moved to the area. So what can you do as a councilman? What will you do to try to keep that community that people are wanting so much of, and deal with that growth appropriately?
Okay, well, you hit it right on the head there when you said they want to try to keep the hometown feel, but you got the massive growth. And that's where our downtown area, for people that have been around long enough to know what the downtown area brings to Waxahachie, and the feeling of community that you get when you're down there. And when you go to one of the festivals that are down, or when they have one of the sip and strolls, or they have one of the things that they have, then you understand what that feels like. You don't know how many people I talk to when I'm out on the northern end of town in some of the new neighborhoods that they're building, that they have no clue what's downtown. They've never been down there. So their thought on keeping the hometown feel, and the people that have been down there in that area, don't always tend to mesh. But we need to make it mesh. We need to try to make it mesh to where we get these people that are, to where everybody gets that. And what we have right now is you're right. It's growing. And I mean, I can tell you one, I've argued the point before. that stopping the growth is very difficult to do, and you can't just immediately stop it. But there are things that we can do to slow the growth that haven't been done. And
Okay.
examples of how you can slow it. You know, Waxahachie currently, they haven't changed anything yet, but they're in the process, currently has zoning single family 1, single family 2, and single family 3 zoning areas. Single family 1 being the biggest lots with the biggest houses, and single 3 being the smallest houses on the smallest lots. Well, if you look at what has happened in our planning and zoning and through our city council, is they went through and zoned a ton of stuff in the last comprehensive plan, single family 1. And they did that with the thought that, well, yeah, we'll be able to change it down the road if we want to. Well, now what they're doing is they're getting these things called PDs, which are planned developments. And with a planned development, all that zoning that you just talked about, single family 1, single family 2, single family 3, that's just out the window. Once they go to a PD, it's just everybody negotiating on what they want and what they don't want. Well, that right there is where the city has the opportunity to slow growth. They don't have to allow that planned development. You can tell these people that bought the land or who are in the process of buying the land that, no, that's zone single family 3, and we're leaving it single family 3. We can talk about what you can do within single family 3. Most of the developers don't want to do that. They want to maximize every dime they can get out of it. And I'll give you an example. The last thing they approved, or it's not the last thing, but one of the most recent, is Montclair Heights, which is out by the new high school.
Right.
There's going to be 300 or 400 houses out there. The developer agreed to build a road, a 4-lane divided road on half of the property, and put a red light to help with the traffic flow by the high school. But when he did that, he also said, I want to build these 40 houses up here at the front that are going to be on little bitty 4,000 square foot lots, and they're going to be almost 2,000 square foot houses. And they're going to call them cottages. Well, that just adds a lot of density into a little bitty area at the front of that thing to maximize what they can get out of the property. And they offered one red light. Well, you can't put a red light on one side of a bridge and not put a red light on the other side of the bridge.
Doesn't work too well, huh?
What's going to happen then? Not only that, the 4-lane divided road that they approved or that he's going to build, it is totally relied on the next property next to it, and for that developer to have his development approved so that you can connect it to the other half of the 4-lane divided highway road they were going to build that connects to Ovilla Road.
Right.
Well, that one hasn't been approved yet. And this is one of those things I told you earlier before we were talking earlier. I might say something that's just a thing of the record. My opponent, when I stood up and said, you have to take into account this other development, even though it's not on the agenda tonight, when you're approving this agenda, because if the other one doesn't come along, then you've got a 4-lane divided road that goes to absolutely nowhere. It ends up in the middle of a cow pasture. So that's not going to alleviate any kind of traffic at all.
Right.
And the response that was given was, we can't worry about that right now. That's not on our agenda. Well, that's not forward thinking. That's not pre-planning for the traffic. It's not pre-planning for everything else. That's not forward thinking. When it's two things like that have been presented for months as dual things that are going to need to come together, you can't ignore that.
Yeah.
You've got to. But that's what, with growth, you can slow that by just not automatically giving PDs. Don't automatically give planned developments. Make them live by the existing. Now, the new comprehensive plan that's coming out.
Okay, I did talk with the mayor about that.
It's calling for density. I'll let you go ahead and ask your question.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, sir. I didn't mean that.
You're
I was trying to get up. I wanted to get us moving a little bit, but I love what you're talking about, because density is a major issue. But I did talk with the mayor about this, and he talked about the comprehensive plan, and it's coming out real soon. I guess it's completed, and they're just finalizing some details. That's what I was told. And it's going to come out. As a city councilman, if you were elected, what kind of things, I mean, what kind of thoughts do you have that a 25 or this plan should have in it when it comes to this growth?
Okay, well, first of all, the understanding I have, there's still another 8 or 10 months on this comprehensive plan. They've been doing their interviews and all that, but them actually doing all the paperwork and getting it developed is going to be another 8 or 10 months before it gets out.
Okay.
But in there, their biggest point that they're pushing is density. They're saying that you're going to have this density or you're not going to be able to pay for your roads going forward. And there are different opinions on how you can do density. And I'll give you an example. The buildings that Mr. Acker built downtown, the condominiums that are 3 stories tall, that are made out of brick, like right next to Pop's Burger Stand.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ones by the county courthouse. He pointed that out, the consultant, that those bring in the most tax dollars per acre in the entire city. And I mean, it wasn't even close to how much in the way of tax dollars per acre that you get out of that in the small footprint that it takes, but it brings in tons of taxes. Well, that's density that you get a lot of taxes on, and you don't get a whole lot of cars coming in and out. You don't get a whole lot of, because it's only 3 or 4 units, but they bring in all this money. Those 3 or 4 units will bring in as much money almost as those 40 cottages, if you 2 of those 3 thing units, as those cottages would bring out in that other place. So there are strategic places around town where you can build those that they won't be conspicuous and look out of place and everything else, and not create traffic issues on roads that we know are going to be 8 or 10 years down the road before they ever get addressed. Yeah, and so we can address the density without just building massive developments. Through this comprehensive plan, they know it's coming, but Emery Lakes has not really been much of a discussion in the last 6 months at all. And, that's 8,000 houses that are going on the other side of I-35.
Ouch, that's a lot of houses.
There's 8,000 houses that are supposed to go out there. Yeah. And that hasn't been discussed very much recently.
That is a huge community, 8,000 homes. So
we've just got to take that kind of stuff into account with that comprehensive plan and the density that they're talking about. The other things that they brought up into the comprehensive plan, is where do the people of the city want their money spent? How do they want it spent? Do they want it spent on parks and this kind of thing? Or do they want it spent on beautifying the city and doing things like that? Do they want to spend it on infrastructure? And they've given the city kudos for the way it's been going, and that the the planned developments that they've been doing are including multi-use. So you're going to see that in some of these new developments where they've got retail on the edges of these developments, hoping to keep people off of Highway 77.
Right.
Maybe they'll go shop in the little shopping center by their house instead of getting on 77.
Yeah.
And that's going to be something that's going to have to be really closely watched and see exactly if those things are really working for the city or not. If they're not, then we need to do a direct stop and change quickly.
Yeah, and you know what? Those things, there has to be some flexibility when you have a city growing that fast. I was told by the mayor that we were in the middle of another plan, and because we had so much growth, you had to move on another plan, and the city has to be flexible with that. But you mentioned about spending money. Now, the budget talks are probably going to be starting soon if they haven't already. What are some of the things you'd like to see priorities in the budget if you were elected as city councilman?
Well, first of all, they have begun with all the department heads and everything else, starting to ask them to get their money, their questions ready and what they would like or what they need for their departments. However, they really don't kick into the budget talks with anybody from city council and all that to where they have a lot of input on it until almost June. And there's good reason for that. In April, what do we exactly know on how the money's going to be here? We got an idea, but we don't know what the values of the properties are going to be yet. We don't know what expenses are going to be. We know what they've been in the past, and we know what we can plan on. But this week alone, this last city council meeting, they had 2 items that came that they approved for the budget this year, and they've already had the people come from the departments asking for supplemental appropriations because the shortages that you're having on supplies, getting supplies from all over the country and the things of that sort, the price of gas skyrocketing like it is. Some of these projects are coming in and they're costing 30% more than ever projected. So, a lot of people ask, I had one person, when I first announced my candidacy and I put it on there, I had a gentleman ask me, will you commit to voting for the no new tax rate regardless when every year that you're on city council if you get there? And I had to answer him and say, no, that's irresponsible today to tell you I'm always going to vote on the no new tax rate when we don't know what the finances are. You have to have the data of the finances. Now, then I did talk to Michael Scott and Chad Tutchison from the city, and I asked about how it was going right now. And right now, I'd say that I think that at least, and when I say at least, I mean at least a 1 cent decrease in the tax rate, and hopefully more than that, because right now sales taxes are greatly above what we would have expected. The sales tax revenue is coming in and it's really strong compared to it. However, the expenses are creeping up and they're starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The fireworks show alone that HEB's always paid for on the 4th of July used to cost $10,000. And they came and asked for an appropriation from the city for $10,000 because the fireworks this year are going to cost $20,000 to do it. Now then, Laurie Mosley is going to go on and start soliciting funds from businesses and everything else. So hopefully that $10,000 that they're asking for will be given back to the city and it not be a city expenditure. But that's just an example of the costs and how they've risen. And yes, your property taxes are going up, and yes, your property values are going up. So hopefully we would be able to lower that more than 1 penny. And hey, you don't ever know if the tax rate or if the appraisal values come in high enough, it might force a 2 or 3 cent decrease just because of the numbers that are coming in. So have that vote, that 3.5% increase that triggers an automatic vote. Right.
Now, Chris, so in general, I'm sorry, Mr. Wright, in general, can people depend on you to be open to cutting taxes more so than open to raising them? Now, you've given a very balanced answer sort of to that, but I'm talking in general, your thoughts on raising and lowering property taxes.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to get into the verbiage of what you're talking about when it comes to raising and lowering, because that's an argument that you get from the far right and the far left when they start arguing. And I've said it a million times, I think city politics is nonpartisan and should be. However, that no new tax rate, if you bring in $1 over that no new tax rate, then required by law, it is to say that is a tax increase and that the city is raising your taxes because you're getting more money in the new budget than you got the previous year. And I will definitely try, if it's fiscally responsible, to cut taxes lower than that 1 cent that I said that right now it looks like it can be at least 1 penny because of what's coming in. But yes, if the finances prove that we can afford to do that and not give up our program that we've got on maintaining the infrastructure and the streets that we've been going through, then yes, I would definitely support working on cutting it even further. But I'm not going to throw away the programs that we've done, because I lived here when the streets looked like crap and when your toilets would back up into if you were in the wrong part of town or in the wrong neighborhood, your toilets would back up into your thing because the pipes were busted and were crushed in. And you had streets that were horrible. People still tell you that there's potholes all over everywhere and that the streets are horrible. But then on the other hand, in the same sentence, they'll sit there and say, well, when are you cutting my taxes?
Right.
And you can't literally do both. And the guy on the comprehensive plan, that's the one thing he will tell you is you don't have to agree with me on density and you don't have to agree with me on this, but I can tell you right now, if you go cut your taxes too much, you're going to end up like Lancaster and you're going to end up like Flint, Michigan, and you're going to end up like some of these other cities where they went through and they cut them and then they ended up not being able to take care of their things. And then the growth stopped. And when the growth stopped, They didn't have any income extra coming in, and they couldn't take care of the stuff. And then everybody starts moving out, and you get blight.
Yeah, it gets bad. So unfortunately, we run out of time. I actually went a little bit over because you have been so informative. I wanted to go ahead and give you this opportunity to talk to the people of Waxahachie. Before I do, I did want to give you like a quick question. If you could please give me an answer. Can the police expect your complete support?
I support the police and the fire department. They both are two things that are very, very important to Waxahachie. And it's one of those things that, you know, nearly every dime of the ad valorem tax, they pay for the police and the fire department.
Yes.
We're back on there. The sales tax pays for most of the other stuff. Sales tax, hotel, motel tax. But yes.
Yeah, excellent. So this is the point where you talk to the people of Waxahachie, Mr. Wright. Go ahead and tell them, you know, go ahead and give your pitch.
Well, I would hope that you guys would see what my thoughts and some of my opinions are on here. I'm out putting door hangers on that have my phone number. They've got my email address. They've got my website that explain more things about that. I'd love to talk to you. I go to all the city council meetings. I'd love for you to come talk there. But I just tell you my platform, and it's firm and decisive decision-making, not bouncing around and saying one thing and then voting differently. Fiscal responsibility, and that's not just spending the money. That's also the tax rate and how we do that. Complete transparency where you guys are there. I've asked on the agenda that they take any money spending that's on that agenda where they have a consent agenda at the beginning of the meeting. They take that off and put it in the public meeting because that's your money that they're spending, and you ought to have a right to talk about your money and how it's being spent. I can understand if it's a little tiny amount of money, but not when it's $200,000 and $300,000. And then controlled growth. And when you're doing your controlled growth, you got to take into account the thoroughfare plan, current and anticipated traffic flow, and all that. And right now, we say we're doing it, but when we know that TxDOT's telling us it's 10 years down the road before they're ever going to get to this road, and then we approve a development with 800 or 900 houses right there where that's going to be, that's irresponsible. And it needs to be at least a voice taken into account that we need to do that. And so that's where I stand on things. And I'd hope you'd vote and give me your support. And thank you, Mr. LeBron. I really appreciate, DV, that you've given us the opportunity. I like what you're doing for the community, and you're doing it for the county. And I notice you're doing it for the other cities. It is definitely a thing for the people.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm humbled by everybody's support. Believe me, that this is a labor of love. It does take work to do. I have the city manager coming on. I believe it's the 29th. So we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty of what's going on the day-to-day process, the non-political side. And I do have the incumbent for Place 3, Miss Melissa Olson, coming on Friday, and she will talk about her plans for the city, etc. if she's elected. But like I tell every candidate, thank you so much for wanting to volunteer and help your community, Mr. Wright. I've seen you, you know, I've known you for a couple years online, you know, here and there, and I know that you're committed to doing something good for your community, and for that I am grateful as a citizen in this county. So everybody, you take care, and I hope you like the information that was on the show.
Thank you very much.